Hi everyone, this is Aki with another Keynote video, and we're going to go over charts in Keynote, and these are some examples that are showing some of the charts that you can create in Keynotes, like bar chart, pie charts, area charts, radar charts, interactive charts, and so on. And I'll show you how you can add your data. So all this that you're looking at right now, it's actually with data put together and used in Keynote, and how you can modify the axis, the numbers formatting, the colors, as well as the charts that you're using, and make them more useful. And there's another one, pie charts, right here, and how you can also add animation for the charts if you have a presentation, and how you make it more interesting. Like this is the interactive chart that I just mentioned briefly. So we will go over all of the charts and how to format each of them. So let's get started. We're going to go over how to create a stacked bar chart in Keynote. And many of these lessons right here will apply to bar chart, column charts, stacked column, stacked bar charts, but because they're very similar the way they represent data. And I'm going to show you how you can create something nice like this in Keynote using some data that you can copy from Excel or Google Sheets. So I'm going to show you from the beginning how to get started. So I'm going to have an empty slide right here, and now I want to insert a chart. So either you may have a data already in Keynote, but let's see if I don't even, we can just start fresh from the beginning. We have an empty slide, and at the top of your toolbar, you may have an icon that says chart. You can choose this, select this, and you will have options of different charts, and it already shows you some default coloring that it has. And I mean, they're okay, but they're not necessarily something you want to maybe have as a final, but you can modify anything. So it's good to start with something and later on you can modify. Now you have a 2D, then you have a 3D, which I don't really recommend. That's very 1990s or 2000 year. They just don't distort data. Perspective is strange and so on. So I would recommend using either 2D, or you can also use the interactive ones, because these are interesting, especially for presentations. They can have some interesting effects, but we're going to go to 2D. Now, another way to get to charts, if you go to Insert, Chart, you can also specify a select from here. And you can always change your chart. So if you select your chart, let's say I'm going to, let's maybe start with this color right here. And it just places, Keynote places some dummy data in it already to kind of show you how this will look, so you have an idea. And you can change everything, but it gives you an idea. Now, if you want to at any point change the format, now, once you enter the chart, if you unclick it, you don't have any options to change the chart, like format it and so on. But if you click the chart, if you go to the top of your menu of your toolbar, you have format. Now under format you have chart. So this is kind of showing all these additional options that are available now since you have a chart in your Keynote. And you can change the styling right here. If you just scroll through, you could change the styling on a spot. So even though we selected at the very beginning, at any point you can change things. So you can do that. And also you can change the chart colors right here. So even though maybe you have this chart right there, but you want to change at any point, you can also, these palettes, however, they're not the best, and images, they're just adding more complexity to your data, and it's making it unnecessarily complex. And you want to make sure that the charts that you're having are communicating the information to your viewers. So then you can also scroll to the bottom and you have chart type selected there. And actually you can change the chart here as well. So I could, change the type of chart that I have, even though I selected something. Maybe after you put in your data, you realize, well, you know what, doesn't really show my data in a way that's communicating correctly. So you can change it here. So that's no worries, you can change it here. So we're actually going to use the stacked bar, which is what I use in this slide. So I'm going to start it with here. So once I kind of decided what I want to start with at the beginning, you can click the edit chart data. And here is kind of showing you what kind of data is listed here. Now, I'm going to paste my own data. You could, try to manually enter the data here. Let's say you're changing anything, but you don't need to do that because that's a lot of manual work and you may make mistakes. So for now, I'm just going to close this out and go to my Google Sheets where I have the data. So I actually have this data about car sales in 2021. I'm doing Command C to copy and then go back to Keynote. Okay, let me change it. Okay, I'm back in Keynote and now I'm going to click Edit Chart Data. And here in the way to paste this data, you can go in the top left corner cell and you can either do Command V to paste it over the data. Now I can close this out and see what happens. So right away, Keynote, it's a tool. So you have to make sure that the way you're representing that data, you have to make sure it's correct. Keynote is a tool, like Excel is a tool. You still have to perform checks and balances and analysis to make sure that you're representing the data correctly. For example, I know that this data is representing quarterly data, quarter 1, 2, 3, 4. And here, this bar at the end, that's actually total. So I don't need to plot that. So if you want to remove certain data, which this is a total data, total for the whole year, I can just select this column, click the arrow down, and you can do delete the column, or you can actually insert more data. I'm going to delete it and close it out. Now, okay, that looks better already because this is a true presentation. Now, I still don't have labels and such things, but I want to show you one more thing here. When we are in your chart data editing process, now you will notice kind of that the Keynote kind of made a choice for you how you want to lay out the data. And sometimes you paste certain data and it just doesn't look right in the chart. So you have two options. At the very top of chart data, you have, if you hover over these two icons, one is showing plot column as series. So that's what it's doing right now. Whenever your data is longer down than wide, it will try to plot it as data series. If you want to change it and see how this will look, you can select this option, plot rows as series, right there. And then you can see, does that make sense? You see what it's doing? It's selecting the quarters in your y-axis and then putting it what was sold by each of the car manufacturers, which kind of, it doesn't really provide much good information. So I'm going to switch it back. But this is the way to switch if your data ever looks weird. Maybe you can switch it what's really the data series that's being used. And whenever the data is longer or square, many times Keynote select this as being the data series, the rows being the data series. But I'm going to select the columns. And right now, let me check my data. So, okay, I just have numbers here. Now, do I really need the rank? I don't really need that. So I'm going to delete this because that was also plotting it. Oh, I didn't even notice that it was plotting it, so that's not good. And so now I know I have quarterly sales data for each of the automaker. This is good. This is what I want. Now we're going to concentrate on formatting it. So this is kind of like a default look. And what we want to do, now, we can maybe, let's just click first. If you select the chart, like this, I can just go through some of these options that I can do. I can add a title to my chart. I can add a legend, captions, border. I don't like to add a lot of things. Title, sometimes I add it within the chart, or sometimes I add it just outside the chart in Keynote, outside, like as a text box. But let's just keep it this way. Now look at the legend. The legend right now, it's like in the middle of the chart, so this is not good. That's not what we want. So let me actually uncheck the title and see what we can do with the legend. If you select the legend, you actually can drag it where you want. So I can actually drag it here, or I can even, if I select the chart, you just have to kind of click it and maybe resize it a little bit smaller. And you can resize it all kinds of way, but just be careful not to make it skew too much, so it really looks representative of your data. And I can select the legend. I can actually put it here, and I can actually, if you see the squares I can actually try to stack it like this if I make the box smaller. So you have a lot of options how you want to change your legend right there. And now maybe I want to put a title. Now I can add the title right there, because otherwise there was just not much spacing in between the two. So here we have the font, and I'm just going to actually use the Helvetica, maybe Helvetica New, so you can change the font for the whole chart, and it's changing it everywhere. And you can see if I click on each of the sections, it's actually showing me different options that are for these sections. So let's say for this, if I select these y-axis labels right now, I can select how they are laid out, how they look. I can make them bold and so on. Let's say I'm just going to, now don't add things like shadows. I mean, that just makes everything looks really dated, and it makes things harder to read, especially if people are reading these slides from far away. So don't add unnecessary things. So let me go back to actually here, the data at the bottom, which are the numbers. Now I can see that there's a lot of space here at the end. You can actually change the amount of values that are labeled for your x-axis and y-axis. So for x-axis, I have to select the chart, and now if I go to axis, now I can specify to show axis name. I can show axis line, but I don't need that because I already have some labeling there. And now I can see how the data is represented: linear, which is the numbers that you put in, or percentages. And I want a linear, not a percentage, because percentage would be out of 100, so it would just take the whole bar chart. And now here is what I can say, what's my maximum number. So I'm going to say, so for my maximum, maybe I want to put 2 million. Okay, so now it fills up more of the chart area. So you can put the maximum. So if you have a lot of white space, now you should try to keep it from 0. Many of the charts are in a visual representation, when they don't start at 0, they become very skewed. So you have to be very careful about that. Now you can also change number, like you can specify if it's currency or numbers or percentages and so on. I have a number here, but you can also add, if you have decimals, you can add decimals. I don't. It's important to add maybe the thousand separator, because that keeps the data clearer to read. You can show minimum value or not. I like to show the 0. Now labels here, sometimes it helps when you have, like, especially if you have text, you could do something like at a diagonal, text. So maybe for numbers it's not necessary, but sometimes for text it may be, if you have a lot of text here and you want to make sure you show all of them. You can specify if you want to have any kind of grid lines or not, and how it is represented. Maybe dash line would be enough, and minor or major. So I don't have any minor. I don't need more grid lines. It's just adding unnecessarily too much information, and so on. So this is for the X, and you can do the same thing for Y. Now this is also saying, do you want to show all categories? Like in our case, we can see all of them, but maybe you had too many you could skip. If you, let's say, you have months, you know that if it's January and February is afterwards and March is afterwards, so you could skip after a few months. But in our case, we want to show all of them. Now, what else do we want to change? We want to probably change the colors. So the way to change the colors is actually if you select each of these colors, like if I just click on a chart, I can just go to style, and here is where I can change the color. And I actually don't want a gradient. Gradient just adding unnecessarily formatting and design to our data. So for the second bar, I like to use the same color, so I'm going to use this color, but now I'm just going to maybe change the shade. So if you want to change the shade, make it darker, you can just go to the first color option and make it maybe like a little darker here. So you can just keep it all in the same shade. So it's like you don't have it like a rainbow effect kind of thing. You want to decrease the font across the whole chart. It's my cat. You just click this font right here, icon, and okay, I'm making so much noise, and decrease the letters across, and then I can add a chart title. So here I kept it separate as from my chart, but I can also add it right here. If I just click on it and paste it, I can also make it a little bit bigger for, oh, it's changing it everywhere. So I guess that's a disadvantage if you just have it. Oh, I can select it like this and just change it for the top. You can also add certain things. For example, you could make the rounded corners, so you can see the bar charts like are changing. So this is like a cool way of changing. Now you can also make gaps between them wider. So like if you want to have little gaps between them, you can change it here. And another thing is, don't add shadows, please. We talked about chart type that you can change here. Now for axis, we don't need a name because we have a numbers here, but maybe we want to say, this is an actual numbers right here. If it was, let's say, millions or something like that, like for my X value, I would have to axis name add millions, but it's actually an actual number, so I don't need to do that. And car makers, this is already kind of clear, so you don't need to add more information to your charts to overwhelm viewers. And this is kind of how it looks, and it was pretty quick. Maybe one more thing is I actually do want to have an axis line right here, so when I unclick it, I can see it at the bottom. So this is a quick way of inserting a bar chart and modifying it with your data. I'm going to show you how to create an area chart, and look at my other video with the bar chart with some of these formatting issues, but I'm just going to show you kind of a quick way how to get started. So I'm kind of going to try to redo this chart that I've made. I'm going to go to empty slide, and I'm going to first find my data. So I have this data right here in Google Sheets. I'm going to copy this over, go to my slide. I can either select the chart right here or go to insert and chart type. Chart types are listed here. Now you can always change your chart type, so don't worry about it if you're not sure what to use, because you can always change it if you feel like your data is not represented well. So I'm going to select the 2D chart. The Keynote just puts some dummy data there for you, so you kind of have an idea how it looks. I can click on edit data. Now I already copied my data, so I can go to the top left corner cell, do Command V to copy it out paste it over. So now you want to analyze, like Keynote is your tool. All these things we're using are tools. That means we have to still review and analyze if this makes sense. So I do not want to, I know I have data for car sales in China, Europe, and USA. Now I have a total here. Then obviously I do not want that. So I can select that row and that down arrow, say delete the row. So now it's a better representation which I have. Now you can switch quickly how your data is represented. Whenever data is wider than longer, many times it uses the rows as data series. That's what it's doing right now. If you ever want to change it, you can click this icon in a top right corner to show the columns, and right away I can tell that this does not make sense. It's not really showing much information, especially that the areas are labeled. They're plotted below, on the x-axis. So I'm going to go back. I like better having the years plotted as an x-axis, so that looks much better. Now I can close this out, and now I can play around and change some of the stuff so it presents more information, because right now I don't know what this is. This is like a blank. I can add a title, I can add legend, and I can move that legend around a little bit higher, let's say, if I wanted to, or on a side. If you grab by itself, then you can move it. If it's like part of the chart, sometimes it's selecting it both at the same time. Like you see, like if I move this, it moves together, but if I just select it by itself, I can just move it by itself. And you can position your chart in the middle. Now I can change the colors. I can select the chart and go to chart and select different options. Now whenever I'm looking at this chart and then comparing to the chart that I put together, like here I can see that I have data for China, then on top of it it's Europe, and then on top of it's USA. But then when I go here, this blue, it's at the top, then the Europe and US colors are not showing up because the type of chart that I selected, it's 2D area. So it's not good for like when you have multiple data points. So I actually have to change it to stacked area. And now I can see each of the regions laid out this way. So sometimes it's important, when you're looking at the chart, try to understand it and see why is it not making sense. I'm just going to copy over the title. So you see these numbers 15, 30, 45, 60, they're actually in millions. So I do want to add a label to my chart. So if I go to axis, I want to select axis name, and here I can say millions. So that data, that information is needed. I don't need to say date or years here because it's just obvious. Here I'm going to go over how to create a line chart, and we're not going to go over from step by step, which I already went over with my other sections on the bar chart that we created in the area chart. And a lot of these options are also the same for the line chart, but I just want to kind of show you some of these maybe more important sections that you might want to be aware for this chart. So the same thing happened, I copied over and pasted my data here in the chart data, and I selected the chart in the chart type, and I can always change the chart type. If I just click on my chart and format and scroll down, I can select something else. So I can change the colors, and I modify all the styles and so on here myself. I added the colors, and if you have, like maybe one thing I would want to change, actually have no shadows like this, or actually in this case, it actually was okay with the shadows. Most of the time I remove the shadows, but it actually doesn't look bad. Let's say if I want to switch the data, now you can see right away that it doesn't make sense this way because it's the data series are months, obviously, so it doesn't really make sense versus regions. So I'm going to go back to having regions, the columns being the data series. So you can switch around here, and here I just added text box for title, and then I have this shape to kind of underneath to get a little bit of more interesting design. I did have minimum in this case. Many times I start from 0, but in this case, otherwise if I remove this, look what happens. It's just half my chart is blank. So in this case, I actually did put in the minimum label for my value y, so it doesn't start from 0. So if you do have that case, you want to make sure you select to show your minimum value. If I unclick it, then it's kind of deceiving what it is. Is it 0 or is it some other number? So you want to make sure you have that. Here we go. I'm going to go over quickly some of these options that are for mixed chart. So mixed chart is a combination of two different charts. So I have bars as well as line, and I have a data here. So if I click on my edit chart data, I can see right now I have the data. Now you may look at the way my data is in this table versus in the chart data table. Now if I wanted to change it, it didn't make sense, so I go back to, because this is wider, so I want to go having rows being the data series. Now the way I had to actually change the representation from the table that I originally had, so I had this table right here, and I'll show you I had to transpose it in Google Sheets before I copied and brought it over to Keynote. So I had the data right here, and I just did copy, and I actually selected another cell and did edit, paste special, transpose, and similar situation if you doing it in Excel. Now sometimes you see in this case I had the month at the bottom, so I just cut and copied over now, and then I was able to copy this data and copy it back to Keynote, and that's how it was labeled. Now you notice that the months I shortened because then it was covering the labels, and I also removed the total, which was the average, which I kept in the table but not in the chart because that doesn't make sense. What I could do is add a trend line. So under format series, I could do like a linear trend line. So this would show you kind of like a trend line of high and lows. So you can add it for certain things, maybe not for this. And the bars, the way I styled that, actually I use a gradient, and if you select a gradient, you can actually select each of the colors individually. So I wanted to show like warmer, so the higher levels are more like peachy red versus the bottom, which is very cold, close to 0, which is the temperature right here. Now maybe I should add also under chart like this axis, and then you go to axis name, and maybe I would just put Fahrenheit. So then it's obvious what it is. I'll show you how to use the pie chart in Keynote. So I'll show you some of the specifics that I didn't discuss under the other charts, like the bar chart that I already went over, the area chart and the line chart and so on. So just want to specifically talk about some other things that you might not have in the other chart when you have in a pie chart. So when you look at this, you see the percentages right there, but if I click on the edit chart data, so I have this sport injuries. So I want to show you the original data that I use, which was kind of, I had over how many categories, about 20 categories, but I didn't want to make this overwhelming for my pie chart, so I just selected like the top, 7 or 10. And the most important thing is, when I originally pasted the data, I just pasted the 7, and I didn't have this other column here. I just had it like that, and this basically showed this was skewing the information. It was actually misleading people, just saying these are the injuries, that there's no other injuries. So that's not correct. You want to make sure that if you are using partial data, that you also, if you're just using certain top data, either you just says, the top sport injuries, and then make a maybe note that other are also not represented, because look at this, 36% of injuries are actually happen with other things besides the ones that I selected. So this is an important big part of the data. Now when you're using the pie chart, I selected the legend like I mentioned previously. You can resize it and change it and have it laid out in different ways, and you can move it around. If I select this and if I click on wedges, here are some of these options that are not available in the other charts, which is like how you want to display it. You could display it as a number. So when I click on my chart data, you notice that I have a number, but if I select, I don't want to show the number, I can just show percentage because it's kind of better way of showing data in a pie. So I did select percentage. So the Keynote did the calculation for you, and you want to show the values or not. You could do it this way, but then it's just kind of hard to tell what are the sizes. Is this size the same as this or not? So with pie charts, you do want to show the value as a percentage, so people can tell how big each of these pies are really. And then label, you can also move it around inside more or outside the pie chart. Now you also want to, how close, if you want the pie chart to be like this, or you want to kind of break it apart a little bit, so you can do that. And also you can rotate it. So maybe one of the other data points, you want to have it more in the center, you could do that as well. So maybe the other could be first, because this is the largest the largest section, the largest area. The percentage-wise, it's 36%, so you could do that. And you can also add the data point names, like if you don't want to have the legend, maybe you remove the legend. So you could also select the legend and click delete, so you could do something like that. And these are the kind of additional options that you should be aware with the pie chart in Keynote. Here we're going to go over radar chart and some of these additional options that you might not be, that you might have to think about when you're using radar chart. And sometimes they're hard actually to figure out what can you plot. And actually I'm having the same data that I use in my pie chart. And you see this is the same information that's represented here, but it has different type of information. So here we just have the injuries, the top injuries for all ages. So all the ages are combined, versus radar chart, you can have the top injuries and then you can actually add additional criteria. Like I have a division between less than 5 years old, people between 5 and 14, 15 and 24, 25 and 64, and over 65. If I click at the edit chart data, I can see, and again, we have the data wider than longer. So the data points, data series are the rows. And here you see I just have the numbers right there. If I want to switch, I can do this, and it's not really represent the information as well as if I just select the rows. And here I can also, select the colors for the chart. So the chart has that information. Now let's see what else we have. We have these options, like we can do kind of like an area, almost like with the area chart. This one is change the series to have a stroke with no fill, and this one has a much thicker line. So you can opt which option you would prefer. And this one is actually pretty nice. And you can have an angle. Maybe you can rotate it. Maybe certain group you want to at the peak. You could do this like this. If you want to just type in 180 or 270, or just manually move it, what have you. You can do that as well. Okay, in this case, I also actually have the maximum, because if I didn't have it, it was really you can see the chart has a lot of empty white area. So sometimes if that's what you have in your chart, that means you might have to modify the maximum so you don't have that much white space there. So I have the maximum in this case. Now major steps, so you can change the amount of steps that are shown. So I have 4, which is fine. So we're going to go over how to use the interactive charts in Keynote. So we're going to start, I'll show you first, I have a couple of, so I have this interactive chart right here, and I can tell, once I play my presentation, it's actually going to be moving, and at the bottom you can see that the quarters are changing, and the sales for each of the car makers is changing as well. But if you're looking at it, you might not be able to tell right away. Now you can turn 4 different charts into interactive charts. So we're going to try to do that with this stacked bar chart. So I have this chart. If I select it, if I scroll down to the bottom, and let me just actually resize it just for a brief moment so you can see some of these options, because if I select it, you won't be able to see. So if I click chart type, I have interactive column, interactive bar, scatter, interactive, and bubble. So the one really are the bar and column, which are easiest and most useful, and the scatter could be helpful as well. The bubble is kind of tricky with some data, but I have this one, and I'm going to select bar. So once I selected it, now that looks strange, but now what happens before on this, I want the manufacturers on the left, and I want the quarters being data series. So let me go back to edit data series, and I'm going to say I want to have the manufacturers on the left, and then the data series, the quarters being changed. So now I have the quarters being changed right here. And now I'm thinking, what happened? Like the bar was like filling the whole area. Now it's just like very small. Maybe I have to go to axis and actually change my maximum, because now I only see quarterly totals, not for the whole year totals. So now I'm going to actually let me see what's the largest amount. So the largest amount I can either check in edit data series, or just look at, if I just go to these quarters, I can see that none of them are more than 750,000. So maybe the maximum here, I'm going to do 750,000. So now, and maybe I'm going to remove this legend. It's not necessary. And now, if I go here to my arrow, let's go to quarter first quarter, second, third, and so on. And I can still change the colors here. If I go to style, I can change the colors. Maybe I don't want it. Or let me go, if I go to a chart, if I can actually, I should have a color list here. Oh, I already had it. But I actually had a chart style saved as well. So I could modify it a little bit because I had a more rounded corners. So I could do this like that to change it back. But now, basically now I can see the data, and it shows how the data is changing. So now if I play this, that's not really interactive. So one more thing you have to do, you have to select the chart and go to animate, and actually have to click an effect magic chart. So now the chart will be changing, and you can add more time if you want to have additional time so it's not too quick. And if I play it, now if I go through, I can see being animated and moving through quarter 1, 2, 3, 4, and I actually enlarged the font for the quarter so you can see that that's the changing item. That's why it's moving. So you want to be obvious with your presentation what's actually happening in your interactive chart. Now, 2 more things that I want to point out in the interactive chart. If you go to chart, you have these options to show slider and buttons. So that's what I have right now, but you can also just show the buttons, so it just goes through different options. Now I can do this when I select it. However, if I don't check the show data sets as builds, basically what will happen, it just stays on one quarter. So you see, if I play it, it's actually moving to the other chart that I had in the other slide. So you want to make sure that you click show data sets as builds. Actually, let me move this out so you can see the difference. And now if I select this and play, now I can see, the data, it's showing as interactive chart. So these are the things to keep in mind when you're using interactive charts in Keynote. Thanks so much for watching.